Steven Greer and Lue Elizondo are at it again. That's right. This beef just does not end. And is that a bad thing for the overall community? I think it is. But who knows? It just seems like people in the whole world, they just can't help themselves from going after each other. And that's why they wonder why no one has shown up to say, hey, we want, you know what? Forget it. Yeah, we're about to show it. Forget it. Look at what they're doing over there. Who would want to visit this planet? I don't. Anyway, so we'll talk about that. We have other things. There's a big interview that Lue Elizondo gave in general. There's more stuff on the actual hearings. So much and more on this episode of UAP Tuesday on the Down to Earth with KRistian Harloff channel. Thanks for joining us. It's me and Attack Peter. Let's do it. All right, thanks. Welcome back to Down to Earth with me, KRistian Harloff, and joining me today, Attack Peter. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, happy to be back on again.
Yeah, it's good to have you back on again. And
got some momentum now.
I know, for real. Or as the kids say, for real though. Do the kids still say that? I guess not.
I remember for real.
For real. All right. But there's some stuff, man. We were going over the stories as you and I always do, and I remember a while ago, and I don't know if I asked him or he just talked about it in general. Danny Sheen was talking about the beef with Lue Elizondo and Steven Greer. I at least covered it. I can't remember. But either way, it doesn't seem to stop. These two just don't like each other. They don't trust each other. They just don't. I think at one point Lue didn't even recognize or acknowledge that he even existed. It's like, come on. Anyway, let's look at this footage from this interview. He gave a pretty big interview. What was the podcast again? You know,
PBD.
Yeah, PBD. Right. So
in my neck of the woods.
Okay. So and he gets every. It's a huge podcast.
Gets everybody. I mean, he's got like a slant that it's definitely like. I tell people it's like Miami conservatism.
Mm-hmm.
His guest hosts are like people that I can bump into at any point here in Miami. But there is another angle that Patrick Bet David tries to implement, which is more of like logic and business and mellow temperament. So I appreciate that, you know. But.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's the clip. This particular clip is Lue Elizondo talking about Steven Greer, and here this is.
So, okay, let me ask you another question. Steven Greer, what are your thoughts on Steven Greer?
I don't know him. So I don't ever usually have an opinion on anybody. I never talk about anybody if I haven't had a chance to meet them personally.
So I had him on for the second time 2 months ago. And are you familiar with Sean Ryan, podcaster Sean Ryan? Mm-hmm. He had Greer on. Rob, can you pull up that one clip? Because this is the part where it's kind of like, you know.
I think I'm aware of it. I know the one you're going to show.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. I want to show this one here, too. I want to see what you're going to say about it. Go ahead.
When you're talking about these disinformation agents, these knocks, I have somebody that comes to mind, and we were talking about him at lunch. Lue Elizondo. Is he one of them?
Oh, of course. I mean, you know, as soon as he emerged on the stage, I had a very senior guy at CIA who's worked this issue since 1979 contact me about that problem. But remember, the only way that you can control at this point all this coming out because of what we have and what we're pushing forward through media is to control the narrative, the spin. So the people coming forward who get an all-access pass on to, say, 60 Minutes or something like that, are people cleared by this same illegal, corrupt organization because they'll tell the public, yes, the UAPs are real, but we don't know what they are. Well, this is an absolute lie. We absolutely know what they are. Some of them are ours, man-made, and are confused quite frequently with the others, which are of extraterrestrial origin, or ETVs, extraterrestrial vehicles. And those operatives are taught very well to take an issue, grab it, capture it, and then spin it in the direction that they want. Now, the direction they want is endless ambiguity. Gee, we don't know what they are. We don't know what they are. It's nonsense. We've proven what they are. Well, you know, I have 755 whistleblowers.
You have 755 whistleblowers?
Yeah. I mean, this archive is unbelievable.
You had mentioned that you...
What do you think about what he says? Because
Well, where are the whistleblowers? And I'll tell you, isn't he the same guy they wrote an article about, if I'm not mistaken, who apparently was accused of taking people on a tour and then paying some dude to pay, like $500 to drop flares out of a Cessna? Is that the same guy?
I don't know that.
I think there was an article. You can. I think it was done by the Debrief. I think. Anyways, you know, my mom always told me if I have nothing kind to say, don't say it at all. So I've never met the man, but you know, it's nonsense. I don't know what to tell you, man. I mean, look, where are the whistleblowers?
Who is Steven Greer or types like him in your world, in the military? How do folks look at someone like Steven Greer?
We don't deal with him. ATIP was only focused on military encounters, and so you know, as a civilian, I'd never met him. I don't know much about him, and you know, I've never worked with the guy. I'm aware of his feelings towards me. He's certainly entitled to whatever feelings he wants, but you know, proof is in the pudding. You know, we got videos released, we've got Congress involved, we've got an Arrow now, an organization that's been established, we've got whistleblowers coming out. You know, I don't know what to tell you. You know, the people are free in this country to do what they want, listen to who they want. It is a free country, and I encourage people to get all sides of the narrative. I will never tell anybody, don't talk to somebody. Go ahead. Do you want to? Be my guest.
Okay. So you hear all that, and it's like, I mean, look, media can always be deceiving, right? So, but I'll tell you, my first glance at when I listen to that, my instinct, whether it's right or wrong, is that I start to side with Lou on these things, because it just seems like Steven Greer is always in the kind of fantastical element, and he's Star Trek's real, and this is this, and then it does to me raise an eyebrow with the flares and getting accused of just being in it for the money. And everybody can accuse anybody who's selling books or anything to be part of it, but there's just something that's attached to Greer sometimes that seems like, and I'm not saying that he is, but there's been people that say kind of like a charlatan type character, right? Now, as I've mentioned to you many times on this show, what I won't do is say he's lying, don't believe anything he's saying, because I don't know. Who knows? But I just feel that there is, you know, when he said in the beginning, well, he's a disinformation guy, and yeah, he's going to tell you UAPs, but they don't know what they are. It seems to me that Lou has pretty much said that he does know what they are, but he can't really talk about what they are. That's what I've gotten in interviews with Rogan, interviews with other people too. So I don't really, you know what I mean? When you hear that, do you feel the same, or do you feel a little different?
Man, my I've had to kind of like forego a lot of my gut instinct on when I follow this topic. So for the sake of being able to keep going with it. So what I mean by that is both of these guys feel like they're sharing a bit of spotlight, a bit of limelight. So, for example, Steven Greer was this guy for a while, right? He had this mantle. He was the guy trying to force disclosure. He had the whistleblowers. And then when Dave Grusch came out and Lue Elizondo came out, and it felt like a separate wave of disclosure initiative was happening, and it wasn't inclusive of Steven Greer and anything he had done, which I find more and more odd the more I read about the link with Danny Sheehan, right? So part of me thinks that there could be a real concern between the two of them. Like Lue Elizondo could be a legit guy, says what he said, he is what he says he is, and is actually trying to usher this thing through. And then Steven Greer can be like a turd in a punch bowl, right?
Right.
So it's like every time Lou and people in his camp are taking 2 steps forward, someone will point to Steven Greer and say, "This is one of your guys. This is the guy talking about disclosure." So you're all lumped in together. And Steven Greer might be someone who is legit, saying like, "Guys, this is COINTELPRO. This is literally a counterintelligence operation." And honestly, like I could see both of those things. We talk about the Y-Files a lot.
Yeah.
I really like that show. And AJ from the Y-Files has maintained this consistent belief that if these people were whistleblowers, they would not be going to the federal government for permission to say certain things. And therefore he's been skeptical of Grusch, of Lue Elizondo, of all of them since the beginning because of that. And so that's technically what Steven Greer is saying. I don't know, man. It's a tough one. It's a real tough one for me. And I do think as a community, instead of people saying I'm team Lou, I'm team Greer, which is the worst possible thing that can happen, in my opinion, that energy will set everything back. In my opinion, you put your eggs in the basket of a person rather than an idea. All they have to do is find some weird, compromising documents on either of their laptop, and then the whole thing goes to shit because, we're rooting for a person versus an idea. Instead, I'd rather see, shows like yours and Vetted and whoever it is continue to dig up as much as possible on both of them and see if there is anything there, because that's going to push it forward if we make sure we have nobody manipulating us in the space.
Yeah, I mean, look, is a great point, and I think one of the things that's so frustrating in this community and other communities, whether it's the pop culture stuff, all that is, and politics in general, is that everybody's just against each other, and that's one of the main reasons that things just never get done is because people are just against one another. And in this topic, that is just the kiss of death, and it's like
it should be a unifying topic.
100%.
You should expect people are going to come in and try to take advantage of the situation one way or another.
Right. Well, especially though when you have two guys that say they know as much as they do, and what's really out there, that. And, in Lou's comments, it's pretty much, he said, look, I'm not going to say anything bad about somebody, but listen to whoever you want to listen to. And I think that's the approach to take,
He did crack a little bit. I don't know if you felt
He did. He was getting pissed off.
Very stoic demeanor normally, which I really admire. And I think makes him a great representative and a public speaker. And whenever someone like that cracks, I go, uh-oh.
Right.
Because that's something I've noticed, presidential debates going back 2 decades. It's something I've noticed in local politics here in Miami, that you have these people that are kind of like they're archetypes for an aspirational figure, and people are putting hope into these people. And then someone comes out and will say one thing that cracks, the demeanor. And that is a concerning thing to me, because someone like him shouldn't be able to be cracked. It's not the first time he's heard of Greer. He has to know everything there is about Greer.
Sure, but take this also, and to play devil's advocate, there is that this guy's on a whirlwind book tour. Who knows how much sleep he's gotten?
Agree with you there.
You know what I mean? The idea also that the constant stuff that he's talked about with the pressure he's been in, with his family and the other things too. He's still a human being, so I don't care how much 100%. He's done it. So you can crack, and he got himself back to it. But you did see when he was sitting there, he's like, "Well, wait a minute, isn't this the guy that got accused of doing the flares?"
Yeah.
But then he pulled it back.
If I'm nobody, but if ever Lou or his team is listening to this show, my advice as someone who's just watching would be like, you can allude to those concerns without making it seem like you're teasing or poking fun at, because I think if you do that, you lose a lot of people, and you are going to stoke the flames of division by doing that. Because there are people who just love Steven Greer, period. For as a person, like, forget what he's talking about. I've seen it. Like, they're like going to bat for this guy they've never met, right? And so to me, I would say, stay on the issue, stay on the topic. You can say something like, I get what you're saying, by the way. Like, if I'm doing all this fucking work and then there's this guy just like a gnat, and that every time Greer talks, it has some effect, long-term or whatever, it sets you back in what you're trying to do, that would be annoying as hell, for real. And so if that's the case, I would just say, look, Patrick, the reality is, he's clearly someone who's passionate about this topic. He's worked a lot in it. I do have some.
Don't take the bait is basically what you're saying.
Yes,
don't take the bait.
Yes.
And you can see that for sure. And he kind of took it. And this is also where you said is, look, and I want to reiterate the point that I always make of, what if in 6 months from now, all these claims that Greer has made are proven true, and then people look like they have egg on their face. So that's why I never say, don't say, because people say it in the comments all the time, whether it's Steven Greer is a liar, Lue Elizondo is a liar, so-and-so is a liar, this person, unless you can definitively prove that, you can't say that in the same way that you can't definitively say I know what these things are. Like in the same way, I've got, what do you say, 786 whistleblowers. I think it's fair for Lou to say, well, where are they? Because I asked the same thing. Where are they? In the same way.
I've seen some on YouTube. I've seen some of his, the people who he's representing and bringing up, and some of them make compelling cases. And I haven't done deep dives into any of them. I'm sure someone has.
Right.
But the reality is, man, and I think Lou's been smart to talk like this in the past. Lou laid out. I was more skeptical of Lou before he did this book tour, that he was angling for it's a threat, it's a threat, it's a threat, it's a threat. And I am sensitive to that because I lumped that in with military industrial complex things that like we need a new threat. Once we've gotten to the point where we're all numb to like,
more money so we can protect away from the threat. So we need more money for military stuff. Totally.
So I'm always skeptical of that. But recently and more than once, he's laid it out pretty logically where it's like, hey, it's either a threat or it's not. And we don't have a ton of evidence to prove one way or the other, but we should definitely figure it out. And that's what I expect someone in his position to say. Like, it might be a threat and it might not be a threat, but we don't know yet. And that's a problem. I would love him to stay on that because I think that's a strong argument. Yeah. And if it's, and if that's the case, he's not totally opposed to Steven Greer. Steven Greer is the one who's saying it's definitely not a threat. And if you say that, you need evidence to back it up.
Right. All right. Well, there's more inside of that interview with things that Lou said, and we'll get to some other things in a moment. But as I tell you guys many times over, and I appreciate all the comments, people consistently supporting this channel and supporting this show, and I really do. And people are asking how you can support the channel itself. If you want to become a member of the YouTube channel, you can do that. You sign up, you get exclusive content. And then the other way is our sponsors. And I'll tell you one of our sponsors right now, and that's SAN News. Let me tell you about SAN right now. Here you go. All right, let's face it. The world's a little bit in mayhem right now. There's countries invading countries. There's pirates invading ships. There's a lot to talk about in the world of weapons and warfare. Straight Arrow News, it's got your six. Weapons and Warfare, it's a weekly show. It's hosted by Ryan Robertson, and it brings you the news from our nation's frontline defenders and the challenges that they could face. America's military operations are constantly evolving, from boot camp to boots on the ground. Reporter Ryan Robertson provides in-depth coverage of international armed conflicts and the latest technological developments in weaponry worldwide. What I like about Straight Arrow News is that they present the news from both sides of the aisle. They just tell you the news in general, and that is what we've been missing. So for me, it's convenient. I want to find out what's going on in the world of news without a one-sided point of view. I find SAN. So get a front row seat to the most intense and fascinating stories from the world of military operations. Weapons and Warfare has new episodes every Wednesday. Go to san.com/Harloff to listen today and subscribe. All right, thank you to SAN. Really appreciate them coming on board. And let's get back to this thing, Peter. Here's another clip from that interview.
What are your thoughts on Dave Grusch?
He's absolutely an American hero. I know him personally. I worked with him. I had the privilege of working with him. He was part of the UAP task force. Stellar individual, and he is everything he says he is. And by the way, he knows a hell of a lot more, but he can't talk about it. People were giving him flack for saying, oh, it's all secondhand, third-hand information. No, he's got some first-hand information, but he's not allowed to talk about it.
All right, Peter. So, you hear him and he backs up Grusch, and makes sense that he would. They're running the same. They're on, like, as you mentioned earlier, right? There are, unfortunately, teams in this community, right? And Grusch is part of the team of Lue Elizondo, Gary Nolan, the Soul Foundation, all of them. They're all supporting each other. Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, they're all part of like the same team. Which is a bummer to even say, but he is, it. So of course he's gonna give. I happen to share his opinion on David Grusch, as I think a lot of people do. But what I like is how he kind of went further into it, saying, a lot of people think that this guy, I heard from a guy who heard from a guy who heard from a guy, but he knows more and he just can't say more. And the follow up might have been there, and I don't know, I didn't see the full interview, but the follow up might have been there. What I would have also said was, well, when can you guys talk about the things that you all know, and because clearly there's a process, right? There's a process that Lou had to go through in his book to say, okay, you can talk about this, but you can't talk about that. You can talk about this, but you can't talk about that. That you might be able to talk about later, but not right now. How does that work? You know what I mean? Like, how does that work? At what point can the stuff that Lou knows and the things that he's talked about, because he's made so many like claims and wild claims at that, you know, whether it comes to the chips and all these other things, it's if you can go there. When can you be able to go even further? And the same with Grusch.
Yeah, you know, I think the problem is really ours for being people who follow this daily.
Yeah.
And their mission might not be to talk to us and convince us and persuade us. Instead,
That's a good point.
You know, if you're doing, I mean, think about it. If you're doing a book tour, if you're doing a podcast tour of any kind, is the expectation of that guest that he or she has to change up everything they're saying and have more and more and more reveals every day in the 3-week span? Because that's untenable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I could see it as they're trying to get to as many people as possible with a controlled message that's been approved of, and they're trying to work through the system. I could see that. As you know, as someone who's worked in many large organizations, I'm aware of factions forming in those organizations and people in those factions saying, okay, we have an inside track if we go this way to change things in this direction, but if we go the other way, we're going to piss everybody off up the ladder and we're going to get shut down. So the best thing to do is pursue it this way and make alliances along the way. So I actually buy that, you know, or at least it's possible. But I think the onus is on us because we're so carefully monitoring it. And then there are weeks, by the way, and you know this, where there is something new every other day. And so sometimes it gets to the point when you wake up and there isn't something new, you're like, no, it's BS, right? But this is their problem, man. This is their problem as messaging. And I keep going back to the Soul conference. Like, all of this feels like it is the Soul plan.
Yeah.
Like this all feels like it. And that if that's the case, Lue Elizondo's gonna remember he was quiet for months, almost more of a year.
Prepping this.
Where's Lou?
He was prepping this book, and people kept asking every time Danny Sheen was on anything, "Where's Lou's book? Where's Lou's book? What's going on with the book?"
So now it's Lou every day, every other day
Right.
on a new show, which makes sense because he's talking to different factions of a larger audience, and maybe they have plans for, let me do this whole circuit, make sure this specific part of the message gets out, acclimate everybody to this point, and then we'll start the next initiative. If that's what's happening, and that's what the Soul Conference laid out. So
it seems like it is, and it seems like, you know, the conversation, because as you mentioned before, and we're covering this all the time, we're talking about it all the time, is that when it's slow, we know it's slow. You know, like the average person doesn't know it's slow.
Exactly.
But, yeah, we know it's slow, and it has not been slow. I mean, even when I was, Lue Elizondo has been alone, has putting enough stuff out there for people to be talking about what's going on. I had an interview with Jillian Michaels about 2 weeks ago, and inside of that conversation, I brought up UFOs, and she got so excited. She wasn't like a major person who followed, but she's like, "Did you see Lue Elizondo on Rogan?" Like, she knew that he was on, because the mass, by doing Rogan, obviously, and other places and mainstream media, that's the stuff that I'm always talking about. How important it is that the more and more it's out there, and that's like not even. I mean, because he was on CNN, he was on other things. People did cover him because it was too hard to ignore this in general of this particular story, and they were covering it. So the idea that this news is moving, and the fact that maybe it was the plan overall, because the next thing is, as you were mentioning, where everyone was saying, "Where's Lue Elizondo?" Remember the other thing everyone's been saying, "Where's David Grusch's op-ed? Where's that?"
Right.
Because that was supposed to come out a long time ago also. And then maybe they said, well, let's put that on the back burner for a little bit. Let's wait, because let Lou do his thing. And then when it starts to do that slowdown thing again, boom. And then the James Fox
That's what I would do.
Yeah, right. Then the James Fox documentary.
I would plan a year, like with seasons. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, let everybody, like, let Lou do a tour for a while.
It's like a Marvel slate. It's like a Marvel slate.
Exactly that. Exactly that. And that way, you know, there was something that, if you remember when Glenn Greenwald first came on the scene covering the WikiLeaks story, right? And it was either that or Snowden, one of the two. But the point was, he was getting flack on mainstream media for saying for revealing new parts of the story like every other day or every few days type of thing. And someone confronted him on the nightly news and said, if you have this important stuff, why aren't you just putting it out there so we can like find out what it is and do what we have to do? And he's like, because the news cycle, the way it is, if I put everything out today, it goes away tomorrow.
Right.
And I need this conversation to sustain so that more and more people have a chance to like get in on it. Like you're saying with Jillian Michaels. Right?
And it's the conversation that we have about streaming versus, you know, when it comes to
all
just
at once
dumping all at once or episodically. And it's like, because when you have the water cooler conversation of, oh, here's this week, next week, the following week, it's still in the conversation as opposed to, I want it all at once right now. And then it goes away and people care about a different show next week.
And it's working, man, because I got together with a bunch of my members of my family these past couple of weeks for different things, and I noticed I don't bring this up anymore, by the way, so I just sit back and wait for someone else to bring it up, and it's happening more and more, and people are talking about it, and people that would have been freaked out are less so.
Yeah, it's true. It's like there's the only thing I got to make sure of is that, and this is, and I don't know if I was playing a video or something along the lines, and my 6.5-year-old the other night couldn't fall asleep because she's like, she says to my wife, are there aliens coming? And I didn't say anything. My 12-year-old said, they're in the desert. And I'm like, oh no, don't do that. I'm like, don't do that. So like, we gotta have like, and that's the thing, that it's like
time to show her Flight of the Navigator,
right? ET or something, right?
Yeah.
So along those lines, but it is a conversation that more and more people are having, and there's more and more conversations that, you know, it's not as taboo as we've mentioned many times, and there's more things that come out. There was an interesting piece that yesterday that I was talking about where the thought was that essentially one of the reasons that this disclosure is happening now is because the other countries, whether Russia, China, have really advanced in the reverse engineering. And it's like, okay, you know, that's what the language says. As Matthew Pines was talking about this, and he said that the language in that Chuck Schumer and Round's bill basically says, well, you know, it's to be aware of this stuff, this exotic material, because it basically sets up, look, if other countries have it and it's exposed, and we are then exposed of all the stuff that we have, it's like we get egg on our face. We have to start. That's what the whole point of this is. And the people who have been so quietly, no, we can't let this out. That's just what they know. So it's like, maybe they're saying, hey, it's done for. It's time to move past this. So I wonder if that's going to kind of move. Did you see that piece that I did yesterday?
Yes.
Okay. So, and that one of those things that's always mentioned inside of that, as they mentioned, where there's past examples or rumors of things that have crashed. And one of the most infamous, obviously, is Roswell. Mm-hmm. So there is more conversation on this podcast that they had with Roswell, with Lue Elizondo, and we'll play that clip. Here you go.
If you say it's unidentified object, then we don't 100% know, because it may have come from Russia or China or anywhere else that maybe at some point their engineers figured something out that we just don't know about.
That's a great point. So let's go down that rabbit hole for a minute,
please.
because that's wonderful logic, and you're absolutely correct to presume that. So let's take that argument for a second and deconstruct just a little bit. Let's look at where some of this material, its origins came from. So it came right at the end of 1940s. Okay, this is material that to this day we cannot replicate. So that would assume that some country out there has, since in the late 1940s, early 1950s, which, by the way, where was China? It was in the middle of a famine. Where was Russia? Well, they were barely trying to develop an atomic bomb. We had barely broken the speed of sound, Mach 1, and we hadn't been to space yet, right? So that means some country had the technology to build something in total secret and then deploy that capability over controlled U.S. airspace and over censored military installations, and has been doing so for at least 75 years. Now, if that is the case, then this would be the greatest intelligence failure this country has ever experienced, eclipsing that of even 9/11. And I don't say that lightly, because 9/11 just happened, right? I mean, this is, we're celebrating,
23 years.
We're not celebrating anything. We're unfortunately memorializing 23 years. You know, it was a horrible event. But this would be even worse than that, because that means despite the billions of dollars that we invest each year into our intelligence community and our national security apparatus and all 17 intelligence organizations out there, someone has managed to fly under the radar, no pun intended, with this technology, create it and deploy it without zero accountability, meaning no one knows, zero sponsorship. No one knows who's behind this technology. And so that means our country is totally failed. We've been leapfrogged technologically by an adversary, and oh, by the way, have been for the last 75 years. So that's not a really good scenario to be in, right? And so we invest a lot of money to always keep a competitive edge on our adversaries. We're looking very, very carefully at their new emerging technologies, whether it's Russian hypersonics or, other technologies they're working on. We know what they have.
Where do we find this piece?
I guess I can talk about it. So the material that I have personally held in my hand was acquired by some folks in the OSAP program, allegedly from a crash that occurred at Roswell.
Okay, so that's again a pretty big claim, and the idea that he said that that goes to our point where he's like, well, I guess I can talk about this one. Who signed off on that? Like, who's signing off on this stuff is what I want to know. And
not only that, if you could talk about it, like, you would think you would lead with stuff like that,
right? Well, why? So, but it's also the idea. Ultimately, what he's saying though goes back into that thing that Matthew Pines was saying, right? And it's that the idea of, like, if all these things are happening, and if they do have these other capabilities, then we got to start. I think this is why one of this push is definitely happening, because it's going to be like, because eventually, why, if another country is like, okay, look, we're going to be able to implement this technology that we've done through this reverse engineering program, we can do this stuff and not tell anybody where it came from, and look what we're able to do and advance radically. And we have the information of exactly how they did that, and we're not saying anything. It's the same conversation, Peter, that you and I had last week, which is, I get it. You want to keep secrets quiet for national security? I get it. The problem is, why do you guys get to know what's out there past everybody else in the world, and you guys are just the gatekeepers because you knew about it first and because you're part of the government? No. It just doesn't.
But that's just the MO of, a major organization like the federal government. It's like, because, and that's the answer. Just because. There's probably lots of reasons they could itemize, but the ultimate is just because. What are you going to do about it? And that's the sense I always get when it comes to the federal government, and them lagging behind, whether it's on civil liberties or things like that. It's just because. And so unfortunately, the only way to change that is for the population to fully come to terms with this information, so that the federal government looks silly,
right? Because
it's so obvious, right? And that's what I think has happened historically, where you had candidates for president on both sides. You can find video footage of them being against certain civil liberty advancements, and then suddenly they're for it because, the government's catching up with society. So hopefully that's what this is.
Well, the other point that Lue Elizondo made on this show in that clip was the idea that, well, if it is stuff that these other countries have been working on for 70 plus years, and we have been and basically they've been shooting back and forth over our airspace, and we haven't been able to do anything about it, then that's a big fail in our system overall. And Marco Rubio, who has pretty much also been somebody who was very heavily involved in this topic for a long time. And speaking of disappearing, he was one of the people who disappeared. And I think that one of the reasons was probably because he was up for VP and he didn't want to be associated with that as the only thing that he was talking about. And he let other people inside of Congress kind of take over. Well, he was on Fox News recently, and he gave an interview where they did ask him about it, and he did talk about it, but he gave a similar answer to what Lue Elizondo just said. Let me play this. Here you go.
You're on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and you're really involved in foreign affairs. There have been a lot of articles lately about UFOs. I know this question is a little out there. Is there any truth to any of this?
Well, we don't know. All I've said is we have people that have very high clearances, both today and in the past, who did really important work for our government or continue to do important work for the government, who have come forward with some claims about the U.S. having in the past recovered exotic materials and then reverse engineered those materials to make advances in our own defenses and technologies. That's the claim they make. Now, I don't know if those claims are true or not. What I do know is that one of two things is happening here. Either they're telling the truth, and that is something that obviously would be the biggest story in human history, or we have people in really important positions of government who are crazy and who are out there making up stories and who are still in positions of importance. Either one is a big problem. So we've got to figure out which one of these two it is, because the second one in particular would be very troubling. But we don't. All we know is claims that people have made. These are credible people that have done and continue to do important work for the country. And by law, we're required when they come forward as whistleblowers to take their claims seriously and to investigate them. But we just don't know. That's the answer.
I think he answered this very well, because he clearly believes and clearly thinks, he's mentioned it as much on different shows and different interviews, but he says it, well, look, here's the deal. It's what we've talked about on this show all the time. It's like, fine, you don't believe it, and you cover it, and you say, oh, hey, listen, so-and-so is out there talking about NHI and talking about this, and this military guy's claiming this. Who's pushing our buttons over there and letting us do it if these cuckoo pantses are running out there doing it? And it's like, that's what he's saying. He's like, well, clearly, either these are people that we should investigate these claims because they're high-level people and we should look into it, or we have a bunch of crazy people working for us, and that's a problem, and they need to be replaced. Here, same page. It's like, don't just ignore it and go, don't worry about those guys. They said they saw stuff over the nuclear thing. They were in charge of the nuclear thing. Don't worry about them. Yeah, I'm going to worry about them. They're seeing things near the nuclear facility, and no one's asking them questions. Or if they are, we're not getting the information as far as what it is. And that's ultimately what he's saying. But to couple off of the conversation we just had, more and more people are asking these questions because I think it's a ripple effect in the same way now, because Lue Elizondo has been everywhere, as you were just mentioning, and the hosts of these shows are seeing it everywhere now too. They see there are these people and they're involved in it. They also see when News Nation clips out UAP content, the amount of views that it gets, and they go, you know what? We'll talk about all this stuff, but I'll ask Rubio one UFO question, clip it out, and it'll probably do 7 times the amount that it does. And then you get him talking about what he's passionate about also. You get the answer. So it's a win-win for the community overall, and it's also one more person that's fighting for this thing in Congress.
Yeah, and it's probably great for Rubio to ingratiate himself with, the desired demographic that they want if they're going to run for office in different, capacities in the future, because he took a beating the last few election cycles. Rubio's a guy from Miami, so am I, and I've bumped into him a bunch of times down here. He's in similar circles in terms of the community. I went to a high school here. He was, looking at that he went to the rival high school when we were around a similar age. And he strikes me as someone who's kind of a dork and a nerd in the sense that he'd be interested in this kind of stuff growing up as a kid. But I think I remember telling you that I bumped into him maybe about a year ago when you and I first started talking about this at a Cuban restaurant here in Miami. And, I said, hey, man, other people were trying to talk to him about political stuff. He was trying to get food and leave. I go, hey, man, I see you coming out for this. I think that's pretty good. It's actually, a fairly, good position for you to take, I think. And I think you're ahead of the curve on it. But have you talked to any of these folks in this space, like so-and-so and so-and-so? And he had no idea who I was talking about.
Like, what do you mean? Like, who were you bringing up?
Well, I brought up Bob Lazar.
Okay.
And he didn't even have an opinion one way or another because he didn't know who that was. Mm. And why do I flag that? Because I'm like, well, if you're legitimately interested in this, like, you're going to look into it. Well, I don't think you get kind of interested in it and then start carrying a torch on national TV, right? That's a weird thing. If you're like kind of interested.
What's the intent though? Because the intent from what you're saying is someone who's diving into it in the way that we are. We learn about Bob Lazar. Lue Elizondo doesn't know that much about the Bob Lazar stuff. When Rogan asked him about it too, he's aware of him, but didn't know about it. From what Rubio just said on that clip, He's more interested in hearing the reports from the military claims that are out there now that are saying, hey, this is flying around in the sky. What's flying over, our airspace and those types of things. Bob Lazar's not going to run in that particular circle, if that's the only thing that you're really looking to try to put forward.
No, I bring that up more as did he just jump onto this because it was said internally, hey, this is what we're going to start pushing? You know what I mean?
Sure.
And here's some stuff about it so that you don't have to worry that you're looking like a crazy person. Or is he actually interested in it and he's just being, like a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington type guy?
Sure.
And I have trouble believing the latter. And so it's okay if it's the former. I'm not trying to say he didn't even know about these guys. It's more like, are you really briefed on this or not? And if you're not, I wish you were, because you're taking a strong position, and someone who's not knowledgeable enough, you can poke holes in that person's case of any kind, and then it does damage to all this work Lou and everybody else is doing to make this a mainstream topic.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's in the same way that you want to throw it to the pop culture stuff. When you have an executive that works at a company that is put in charge of a certain IP, and you're like, oh, well, do they know anything about the IP? Right. No, not really. They're just trying to make money. And so in
Rubio's case, I'm always nervous because of the donations and funding that a lot of these candidates get, that it's like military-industrial complex stuff. Yeah. Like, hey, this is the new Al-Qaeda, potentially. So we're going to hedge our bets and start talking about it in this frame of reference. Like this is the world that we're talking about. Right. UAPs is it's a potential threat. Maybe
like there's always an agenda, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's maybe we're going back to our original point with Greer and Lue. Like maybe that's what Greer, if Greer is to be taken seriously and to be considered as a legitimate person in the space, and I feel like he has to have some legitimacy if Danny Sheehan represented him at some point, or is Danny Sheehan off his rocker? And then what does that say about Lou? You know what I mean? But if we're going to give him any credibility, it would be that he's concerned, like a lot of people were after 9/11, that this is going to be the new scapegoat for the military-industrial complex. And so that makes me nervous when I hear folks like Rubio going from 0 to 100, or, you know what I mean? Like that's why I bring it up.
Yeah. I mean, they're all questions that you definitely should ask. And I don't trust any politician, it's like because if they know that it's helping them and it's the one thing that, you look at people, whether it's, I had no idea who Moskowitz, Garcia, Burchett, or Luna even were before I started covering this. And they're not like on the high level of Congress. But this is their thing. This is what people know them for. So they're like, oh, more people know me from this. I'm going to talk about it more. Yeah, and it's not to take away from the fact that they actually do care about it. They clearly do. But it also, hey, you got a bump on so-and-so in the polls when you talked about UAPs last week. Bring it up again. I'm sure that as this does get more mainstream with more people, this is going to be a topic that more and more people will start getting into, and it's going to be less taboo because people will start bringing it up. And when it starts getting brought up at debates and conferences and press conferences and things like that, that's when it's going to shift. And I don't think that's too far away, especially when you start hearing about all the hearings and everything that's happening with the hearings. And I just mentioned Luna's been talking about the hearing that they're going to have, and she's been the one talking about how it's going to be basically USO related. And when we heard that, you and I are like, well, Tim Gallaudet's definitely going to be there. When I had him on the show and I spoke to him, he was on the show I don't think it was a year ago, but maybe 6-7 months ago. So the first question I asked him, I said, sir, if they asked you to testify, would you? I don't even think I finished the sentence before he said yes. And so that is something that I think is going to happen, because check this out. All right, checking out UAP James over here, who is kind of summarizing this. And UAP hearing in November, Tim Gallaudet to testify. Retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet has been invited by the House Oversight Committee to testify at a hearing on UAP in November. To which he says, hard to believe my interview on the Sean Ryan Show is now 1 million views. I think it represents the surge of interest in UAP, previously UFO, since the 2017 story in the New York Times about the United States Department of Defense UFO program. With my expertise in marine science and technology, I have focused on the observations of these phenomena in the ocean, otherwise known as unidentified submerged objects. Yesterday, I was invited to testify on UAP disclosure before the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Oversight and Accountability in November. Not sure if Congress will pass the UAPD Disclosure Act sponsored by Leader Schumer and Senator Rounds, but I will make a case for it based on the right of the American people to know that we are not alone, and the national security implications of that are astonishing reality. Now, this is from 2023, November 15th, Luna and Gallaudet together here. This is not surprising to me at all. Obviously, that he to me is one of the more credible people out there.
Agreed.
I really enjoyed speaking with him. He comes across as someone who's just trying to get information out there. He doesn't seem like he has a hidden agenda. And to have him and someone of his stature will help and get more press out there. It's all about press. Everything's PR. Everything is PR. And obviously you want to get the information out there, but you want to have more things that move the needle, because we've talked about it, and I think we spoke about it last week, Peter, that the whatever this hearing is in this month with Gillibrand and the Arrow, who cares? Whatever that thing is going to be. Who cares what that is? What is it? Yeah, we're working on it. You find anything? Nah.
Yeah.
What is it really? Oh, meet this guy. Who's this guy? This is the new guy. Hey, everybody.
The old guy.
Yeah, everybody. I'm going to help everybody until I don't. And then everybody start pointing the fingers and saying that I'm not helping because my boss has told me to. So disregard that hearing. It's a nonsense. This hearing is the one where it's like, okay, not that anything is necessarily going to happen, but it is the one with the potential that could happen. It's the potential of, okay, they're going to try to stick him in the broom closet again. Remember the last time they were like, they didn't even have a real room, and then they had to fight for it, and they got the room. So they are going to hopefully have a good room. Now, as much as I think Gallaudet is a great witness, can't be the only one. You got to have a ton of them, and you got to have something significant. And you can't. And I think the good news about this also is, I don't want to hear about what you have. Don't tell me what you have. The same way that I think what Burchett said last time, which was so smart, was, well, I'm not going to tell you who we have testifying, because last time I did that, NASA called them and told them not to do it. So don't tell us, don't tell anybody, don't tell us what you got. You know, have everything in your back pocket and let it all rip right then and there and blow the roof off this place. Don't have, and they know it can't be a cockamamie hearing of, well, you know, we have reports that while we were in the submarine, something went by and we went, whoa, that's big. Okay, what else? Well, there's someone else that saw something. It was going at a different speed, and it was so fast, and it was so fast under there, and it was doing things that we couldn't believe. Okay, what else? Because you got to show me pictures of the thing, show me videos of the thing, let's get more of those whistleblowers. That's what it has to be, because you can't, because the fascination part of it, it's over.
Well, that's the thing, is like, if you're trying to put people to sleep over that would be how you do it.
Yeah.
Right. And instead of trying to shut it down, because that's not working, you're just trying to make it a sustained hum of nothingness until people just say, that's nothing here, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's going to take someone saying, screw it. I know everybody's watching. I'm going to say what I'm going to say, but I don't know who has, you know, the confidence to do something like that or the courage, I should say, and sacrifice whatever that's going to mean of their own, you know, liberty and their own, you know, ability to have a normal life after the fact. You're basically becoming a martyr at that point, potentially, if these people are to be believed. Yeah, I think someone like Tim Gallaudet is perfect. I keep thinking about Fravor as one of the most credible guys I've seen. Yeah. And so we need more people like that who aren't, no offense to anybody trying to sell something. I don't believe that if you sell a book, it means you have no credibility for the record. I think you probably iced yourself out of a lot of opportunities financially. Now you got to figure something out. Right. But the people like Fravor, right, and Ryan Graves, I feel like those are the people who are really an asset to moving this thing forward, because it's hard to poke holes and ascribe, you know, intentions to them that are in any way nefarious or right. Self-serving. So Tim Gallaudet strikes me as that kind of guy. Hopefully him up there would continue to help this case and keep it neutral, right? So it doesn't become, like you were saying before, political football. That's the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Yeah, and I think that what is encouraging for me is that it's happening in November, and this is what Lester Nare, when I had him on, said, that he thinks it'll happen in November, which looks like he was right. And November makes sense if it's right after we find out who's going to be president, not before, right after we find out who the president's going to be, because, and then not even sworn in yet, and you have the hearing, you do that, and the things that he said inside of this was not only the fact that this is happening in November, but he talked about the bill and how he's going to make a real push to get this passed. And I wonder how much merit that will have inside of that hearing in order to get it passed, because then that happens in December. So now I understand a little bit more of why you would do it in November if the intent is, well, look at what we just proved inside of this hearing, and now here is the pitch again to get this thing passed in December. That's when you really now have to throw in some big hits into this.
Now you have a new administration, right? And so now you can offer them a potential win.
Right.
You know?
Well, you go, okay, look, so-and-so, you're coming in. We did this hearing right as you got elected. We did this hearing. Inside of this hearing, we proved this, and this. The buzz on this has been incredible. This is something that needs to happen. We had a former Rear Admiral up there talking about how this bill needs to pass. We've tried to get it to pass. If it does, this is all the stuff that happened. Well, so-and-so from this company is worried they're going to go to jail. It's in the freaking thing that they won't go to jail, and it's going to protect them, but we need their information to come out. This needs to pass. That, and then, so potential that's why they do that, to lead into getting the thing passed. Going further to what you were saying beforehand about how the Soul Foundation's kind of Marvel slate is going more and more into play, to which Tim Gallaudet is part of the Soul, or at least has spoken in front of the Soul Foundation. That's how he found our show, because we were covering that, and he was a fan of the way that we covered it and wanted to speak on the show. So he, and he was at that time championing the Rounds and Schumer bill before it got gutted. And he said that they had been planning on the fact that it was going to get passed. So they're going to really, really try hard to get this thing moving. And the other thing that he said that I think should not be buried in all this is the fact that he definitively says we are not alone. Like he's not trying to find out like, oh, there's something flying around in the sky or something underwater. He's convinced that it's not other countries. He's convinced that we're not alone. That's a definitive statement.
He's been like the most, in my opinion, of all the people talking on this subject right now, he's been the one that has the most like definitive thoughts and theories. And I really respect that, because it gives us something to talk about. You know, Lou has in his book come out and said X, Y, and Z, but Tim Gallaudet's like, it's probably in the water. We're dealing with it over the oceans. It's probably here. You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah, he has. I mean, I would highly recommend Darcy Weir's documentary on the USOs. It's really the only one I shouldn't say the only one, but it's the only one I'm really aware of, because I didn't really know. You had mentioned USOs and stuff to me beforehand, but
some interesting remote viewing connections to the USO stuff. That's really fascinating.
But the USO stuff, they really dive deep, I guess, pun intended, in that documentary that Darcy Weir did. It's how he interviews Tim Gallaudet throughout the entire thing, and that's why they were on the show, to promote that documentary. But it really is a look into what's going on in the ocean, especially, and I think one of the most fascinating facts is that we don't really know what's happening in the ocean. We have no idea, because it's so damn big. We know 8% of what's happening down there, or something along the lines. So it would make all the sense in the world that if you had the capability, technology to have stuff that you could just browse around and go wherever you want under the ocean, that's where I would go.
You think that's why James Cameron went down there? Sometimes I think about his whole fascination with that is linked to that.
Maybe it could be. I mean, who knows? I mean, again, that's just a portion of the ocean. I mean, it's like a whole other planet down there.
Have you looked at the Soul chart recently?
No, I haven't looked at it in a bit.
I just pulled it up right now. I'll send it to you so you can stick it in here if you want. But essentially, the chart starts with January 24, where it's phase 1, and it says demonstrate existence. And I feel like if you take all of what's happened this year so far, it falls into that. Like, they've done a good job of demonstrating that this exists.
Right.
Would you agree? Like that box is ticked at the end of this year?
Sure. The question is, when they came up with the plan of demonstrating existence, what as everybody has for anything, what's your target goal as far as who you're trying to reach? Is the target goal me and you? Then yeah, they did it. Or is their target goal the people in your family? You know, what's the target goal? How many people are we trying to prove existence to? Are we trying to do it for media to cover it more and those things? Like, so the answer is I don't know, because I don't know what their target goal was.
Yeah, so I don't know either. I think it's just like boiling frogs, right? Like just gradually acclimating, you know, all of society and figuring out which methods and which place, where to start, right? And so January 24 is all about that. And then when you get to January 25, which we're closer to January 25 than 24 at this point, it's phase 2, and it's correlate signatures. And I wonder if that has to do with like all the data they point to that's tracked in different methods, whether it's radar and you know, and figuring out why that deserves a whole year, you know, in the campaign. Like what they're talking, it says they're going to be forensic about it and the first phase is to try to get government acceptance, by the way, it says. Phase 2 is to get academic acceptance. So next year we'll be targeting academia. So in their mind, they've got the government accepted it by the end of this year, and now they go after academia. And then phase 3, which is October 2030, so I guess they're going to need 4 years to get academia on board, is when they begin to go after public acceptance.
I mean,
I know. It's just interesting because so far so good, right? Like it seems like they have multiple people from both parties talking about it regularly in public forums, whether it's hearings or on mainstream media, and they're not ashamed of it. I mean, people need to remember that this is a major Overton window shift, that you have major players in our federal government talking about this openly.
Yeah. You also can't change what's going to happen with, like, let's say that this hearing happens in November, and there's some big claims, and there's some there's actual proof. You can stick to that plan all day long. But if people are like, hey, wait a minute, what? Tell us more and more and more, that plan's going to change pretty fast from public acceptance. Because, you know, isn't the point of getting the word out there in November or whatever it might be, of more and more people paying attention to this thing? So I don't know, man. It does look like there's a lot more to talk about. There will be stuff to talk about. But as we both mentioned, do you think I'm wrong? Do you think that this month, if it even happens, the Gillibrand thing could be anything, or are we pretty much on
doubtful?
Yeah, doubtful.
Doubtful because I mean, if it is, it's intentional. To destabilize things, because that would shift a lot of attention off of the election, which is about to happen. So I can't imagine there would be anything there. Unless it's non-predicted, it's something that spontaneously occurs, right?
I think it's just to introduce the new guy.
Yeah, that's what I think it will be. I think it'll try to show, hey, I'm objective, I'm open, that kind of energy, right? And to get his name out of everybody's mouth for a while. Yeah. The last guy, I can't remember his name. Kirkpatrick. And then the November one, I'm slightly more hopeful for, because post-election. And that's when there's optimism, and there's like, okay, we're going to start fresh, new administration, and here's an initiative and all that. So we'll see, man.
Well, there is optimism right now, but we'll also see how whoever loses, how they're going to, whatever side loses, how that side's going to take it, and is the side that loses, if they're, you know, whatever part that they have to play in it, are they going to maybe scale back,
take their ball and go home,
or say, well, we're not going to support your girl, we're not going to support your guy, we're not going to, you know what I mean? It's like, so
if that happens, if that really does happen, it is more important at that point for all these channels, everybody, your channel, Patrick's channel, Vetted, Night Shift, everybody, to like just get on board and just be persistent and say, hey, we're going to look past this political drama and just stay on target and keep the conversation going. 'Cause I really believe that this is more powerful than that. It's just, either it's going to happen, like they say, control. Like we'll either do it with you guys in the federal government and work together on it, or it's going to come out the way it's going to come out.
Well, I think these are why these channels, whether it's this, Danny Jones, freaking Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, like
Rogan.
Rogan. Everyone who's talking about it on here, that does keep the conversation going, because yes, the mainstream media can ignore it for as long as they want to, but if you keep doing it, and the more audiences grow and more people are talking, that's why I always tell people, subscribe to every one of these channels that's doing it. Like, it's not, there should not be a Greer versus Elizondo in this space. There shouldn't. Like, it's like, well, don't listen to that person. They don't do that. Listen to everybody. If you want to have the conversation,
there should be a groundswell from everybody in this community to get them to figure this shit out. Yeah. And publicly soon, because I really believe that's a possible downfall for the progress everyone's made.
Yeah, if you
so
do
people
hear
should publicly call for that.
Agreed. If you do hear of other shows that are downplaying other people talking about it in this space, you should call them out on it, because it's like it does nothing for anybody. It does nothing.
Don't be on a team.
No.
Don't pick a person to follow blindly. You don't know these people. We don't know these people.
Conversations.
We're hoping that they're both legitimate, right? That they're all legitimate, and maybe they have different feelings as to why they're approaching things a certain way. Like you said, Christian, they're humans, so egos can, interfere even when people have noble pursuits. But I would say, and I know you feel the same way, people should not get into the camp of a person. People are fallible. Ideas aren't, right? So let's just hope that we can push forward with that energy throughout all the channels, all the communities. Everybody say, hey, let's hear what they have to say. Let's hear what they have to say. You know what? My channel invites you both to come on and talk about this. No? Why not? That kind of thing.
100%. Well, Peter, as always, man, it is good to have you on the show. Where can people find you if they want to check you out?
Anywhere online, I'm Attack Peter. I design toys and artwork. I have no real grounds to talk about this, except I'm just interested in it. But, feel free to look me up anywhere and see me at a bunch of conventions coming up. I'll be at New York Comic Con in October, and then I'll go to a Designer Con in Vegas. So I'll see you there.
I have to disagree with you 100%. You have every merit to be talking about this, because that's the whole point, is that everybody should be talking about this. Everybody should be talking about this. It shouldn't be people who are just, well, I've been reading up on this, and that's my point, is that if people, I've been reading up on this for 20 years, why are you talking about it all of a sudden? Be quiet. Be quiet.
Yeah, that's right. I'm super worthy of being here.
You 100% are. You knew. I mean, you were the one that you were excited when I started talking about it. You're like, oh, dude, and like you had the right approach to it, where you're like, hey, it wasn't like, oh, now you're getting into it, dude. I was like, you were like, no, I'm interested. You're interested too. I got someone else to talk to about this. That's the way it should be. Yeah. Anybody else who thinks because they've been following it longer, or they have access to other people, that they're more important to someone else, that's stupid. It's like, you got to have, like, everyone should be encouraging to everyone doing this. And because it is important that the person today that has no idea this is going on will be the person tomorrow that is doing a show just like this.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So anyway, thank you for joining us here on the show. Make sure, if you haven't already done it, subscribe to the channel. We got a lot of things going on. We're here on our long form every Tuesday, and we are doing this. If you haven't checked out my pop culture show, we actually are covering Spielberg's UFO movie. They just got Coleman Domingo on. Well, they're talking to him about doing it. So we're going to discuss about how that movie is going to be, or should be, an important step forward in public knowledge also. Maybe. We shall see. So thanks for joining us here today. Thank you to Peter. Thank you to all you guys. We'll be back with another video, maybe a little later today, or probably tomorrow. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you later.